delighted to say we're joined by the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch. Kemi, very good morning to you.
Thank you, Mike.
I haven't seen you since just before we did the interview, just before you became the leader, actually. How do you think it's going?
I think it's going well. It's obviously the worst inheritance any Conservative Leader of the Opposition has ever had.
But worse than Labour's inheritance?
I think so. 120 MPs is a historic low.
Yeah.
So we're starting from a difficult place. And one of the things I'm keen to emphasise is the party is under new leadership. Where we made mistakes before, we're acknowledging them and showing people what we can do in the future, but taking time to think it through. None of this making announcements and promises with no plan and no idea how you're actually going to do it, which is what Labour have done and why they're in the mess they're in now.
Well, they certainly are in a mess, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, because, of course, Rachel Reeves is making a big statement tomorrow, the budget statement, which is not... I don't think anyone in the country is looking forward to it, really. I saw that you tweeted out yesterday the Conservatives are going to table an amendment to the crime bill to force a national statutory inquiry into the grooming gangs. Tell us a bit about that.
So we tried to do this previously in the education bill. Not having enough MPs makes it harder, but I don't want to let this issue go. It's something that I have worried about for years. I spoke about it during the leadership contest. It was part of my conference speech. We've got to look after people who are vulnerable. We've got to look after women and girls where they are in dangerous situations, and we also need to see justice done. And I don't think that we have seen full justice done. We had a task force 2023 that found about 500 new perpetrators. We need to make sure that we catch everyone, and that requires a national inquiry.
And should there have been a national inquiry earlier then, under different Tory leadership?
Well, we had an inquiry and it didn't come out with what I was expecting. So that's why I'm asking for a national inquiry. It wasn't that we did nothing. We had a previous inquiry into child sexual abuse. It was too broad, not deep enough into this specific issue. And we had a task force after that, still finding more. So it doesn't just stop where we left things. We can't say, because we did some things and we didn't find out enough, that's the end of the story. We've got to keep going. We can't let it go.
And why do you think Keir Starmer is so reluctant to do it?
I think that there are many reasons why he's reluctant to do it. I think that he is someone who doesn't like looking too deeply into issues that might be contentious. With the rape gangs, there are issues around, where these people came from, culture. I think he's very uncomfortable in that sort of space, just doesn't want to go there. I'm not afraid of going into those spaces. I think we have to do things properly. We have to be brave. That's what politicians are there for, to take difficult decisions. I also think that he wants to move on and talk about the kind of things that that he likes. I know that it's not going to be easy because many of these areas were Labour-run councils. I think it's very difficult for them politically as a party. Where there are Conservative councils involved, I think we should look into it. But people should go to prison, people should go to jail for decisions that were made outside the perpetration of those of the rapes, but also, in my view, when you look at the administration. What were the police doing, councils, who got things wrong? Let's start looking at where failures were so we don't make those mistakes again.
And certainly Maggie Oliver, who we speak to on a regular basis, who you'll know as well, I mean, she will tell you that it's still going on in many of these communities as well.
Exactly.
And so... What would be, when would you find out whether this will work or not?
We tabled the amendment this week.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly when the vote will be, but I want people to know that this is an issue that we're going to keep going with. We're not just doing it because it's newsy. It's something that strikes at the heart of the principles that I believe in. Family is really important. A lot of these people did not have, families that were able to support them. In some cases, where the fathers went in to help their children, their daughters, they got arrested.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that we have strong communities that are cohesive, not all this ghettoization where people look after those who look like them. That's not the sort of country we want to be.
No.
There's so much that we need to fix on this.
I've got some questions for you. We asked earlier for the people listening and watching the show this morning to put questions to you, so I'm going to fire away with some of those. This is from Richard. He says, you say we can't achieve net zero by 2050. Would you allow for more coal power stations to open up? And are you pro-fracking?
So the 2050 plan is not working. And what I've said is that we need to be real. We can't just make announcements and look like we don't, like we're not thinking anything through. Especially when you see China opening a coal-fired power station every other week.
And America doing it now as well.
Yes, indeed. Now, what I'm not going to do is say, yes, we're going to open coal-fired power stations. From what I've seen, nobody actually wants to work in coal mines in this country. But let's come up with a new plan. Let's come up with a plan that works, rather than make an announcement and start scrabbling things together. And the same goes for things like fracking. A lot of people think that we should be fracking, but I also know that many communities don't want it where they are, that it causes problems for them. We need to make sure that we've got local consent for things like that, not just imposing it. So how do we make sure we've got a plan that goes across the board, that works, that is not going to bankrupt us? That's what I'm working on now.
We spoke to a guy earlier today, actually, who works with an offshore company in terms of drilling and exploration of the North Sea, who says that we could actually do an awful lot more, and he believes that that can be sustainable in its own way. So, I mean, I think there's an opportunity there as well, isn't there?
There is, and I agree with him that we have resources and reserves that we're not exploiting, that we're closing down. That's one of the questions I asked Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions a few weeks ago, that why are we letting these things close down when we can look after ourselves, exploit our own natural gas resources and so on?
That's another question that's coming, this one from Anne. Why doesn't Keir Starmer ever answer a question in Prime Minister's Question Time? Can you not make him answer them?
No, I can't. No one can make him answer. But he doesn't answer questions because he doesn't know. He genuinely doesn't know. I thought he was obfuscating because he didn't want to say the truth. And a lot of the times he actually says things that aren't true. But he doesn't have answers. He didn't have a plan. And so he just keeps repeating the same words. We play Starmer bingo in the office now because we know he's going to say certain things, 22 billion, 14 years, but he's got no answers and no vision for the future.
Could you not be more sort of hard line on him, though? Because some people criticise you for not being hard enough on him, and that may be your deliberate particular style. But people say, you know, because Nick Timothy last week said, you know, he told 25 lies in half an hour.
Yep.
I mean, could you not be more, more harsh on him?
I did do that. And there was a time when he actually had to correct the record because he'd said something wrong. And I stood up and said that he had misled the House, and the Speaker called me up for it. Right. So there are these rules in Parliament about not telling people when they're lying.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say it, are you?
Yes, there was a day when I actually did it with a Labour MP where I just broke the rules and I said, you are a liar, you're telling lies, and that video went viral. But I got spoken to after that, and I just thought my personal reputation in that moment was more important. But he doesnn't have any answers. You may have disagreed with Rishi Sunak on his policies, but he always had an answer. He was on top of his brief. Starmer is not on top of his brief, and neither is Rachel Reeves. Yeah. She is totally out of her depth, and they're sort of, you know, just floundering. Yes. They're really floundering.
And you mentioned the Speaker of the House, Long Haul Hoyle, as he's now known, or Just Stop Hoyle, as we call him. Rachel's asked the question, why will no MP criticise Speaker Hoyle for spending £250,000 on his first-class flights, five-star hotels and lavish dinners, plus the £7 million on his Grace and Favour apartment, plus the portrait, £36,000? I mean, I even asked Richard Tice what he thought of it, and he wouldn't criticise him. And he said, look, you know, he's a very good speaker. Does he have this kind of power over everybody? No,
I don't think it's a power over people. I think it's a recognition of the role of the Speaker. The job he does is very difficult. It's trying to maintain, you know, order out of the chaos that is Parliament is not easy. But he also is one of the ambassadors for democracy in the world. So he does travel, he meets people in other parliaments, he invites loads of them to come to the UK.
So, but why do we have to pay for him to go to these places? Surely if he's an ambassador going to somewhere like the Cayman Islands, they should be paying, shouldn't they?
I'm sure that in some cases they do, but remember it's reciprocal. So other people come to our country as well.
And do they pay us?
They pay for themselves.
I mean, I imagine we pay for it. Seems like we're paying at both ends of it. Seems to be.
No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, the Speaker will have to answer for his own expenses in the same way that I answer for mine. But he is keeping rules and order in place. I haven't looked at the full nature of the spending, but I do know that he is someone who tries to be fair and make sure that he's doing right by the people of this country.
Well, he's got a very nice Porsche for £36,000, which apparently I paid for.
Oh, has he?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
And a frame for it for £15,000. You know, which surely is unwise, wouldn't you say?
Well, I haven't had any pictures of myself framed or any portraits taken. You'll be pleased to know.
Okay, well, I can ask you another question now, because a lot of people are asking questions about Rachel Reeves. She's speaking tomorrow. First question from Simon. Should she lose her job because of what she's done to the economy?
Well, I think in any other field she would have. But I think she's actually one of the best that they've got on the Labour bench.
That's the bad news,
which is what's really sad. That if she goes, we're likely to get someone much worse. You listen to Labour backbenchers, And a lot of the things that they ask for are completely crazy. They would bankrupt the country tomorrow. But I do think that she's out of her depth. I remember that first budget where she made fun of me. I wasn't even the leader of the opposition. She made fun of me during that budget. And it was all about how she was the first female chancellor.
Right.
First, she was so proud of herself. But being the first female whatever is not an achievement if you're doing a bad job.
No.
And it's the people that you're working for that should give a verdict on whether you've achieved something or not.
Yeah.
And the mistakes that she made in that budget are what she's trying to fix now with the emergency budget that we're getting tomorrow. This is not something that's reacting to world events. She made errors. Problems have been caused, and now she's going to try and fix them again tomorrow. That's wrong, and I think that she should be judged on that basis.
Yeah, and as you say, she would lose a job in any other situation. She's also in trouble again, the front pages, with more free tickets to things, right? She was at the weekend accused of taking 2 free tickets for Sabrina Carpenter, which she tried to explain away by saying that now she's got security, it's harder for her to do these things. But now, this morning, we learned that she's had another £276 worth of free tickets to the National Theatre. I mean, should there not be a law or a rule of some kind that covers politicians the same way that it covers us, for example? Because we've had business people talking to us saying, if I get a gift of worth more than £25, I have to declare it to the company. There's a thing called the Bribery Act, which means that we can't be bribed by anybody. I'm not allowed to accept freebies, but apparently parliamentarians are. So before I ask you if you've ever accepted a freebie, what can be done? Can you not put some kind of thing in place here? So
we do have things in place. There are rules about what you can and can't do. We do have to declare everything, but many of the things that we get are often as part of the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I would get invited as the Secretary of State, even as leader of the opposition, to state banquets.
Right.
Now, that's a very, very lovely thing. It's part of the, it's part of the official position.
Yeah.
That you
and I
get.
think people would understand that.
But then you then have it across all walks of life. Our constituents invite us to things where they want to talk to us about about something that's going on locally. They want us to open things. So we make sure that we declare it. What I don't understand is where she gets the time to do all these things. I would love to go to more things. I have no time at all. I'm working morning till night, and the enjoyment is just not there because we've got to work so hard.
Well, that is the thing. I mean, suddenly Heidi Alexander actually said that yesterday, and just sort of got Rachel Reeves into a bit of trouble. She just basically said, where did she find the time to do all these things? I don't know. And I mean, I think people would understand it if you were invited by some, constituency organisation that wanted you to come to their, Christmas party or something like that. Fine, but you don't have to go to a Taylor Swift concert with them, do you? Surely.
Well, I think people. This is one of the reasons why it all needs to be declared so that people can make a judgment. So, for example, I got invited a few years to go to Silverstone.
Right.
I don't like I don't like Formula One, but actually Buckinghamshire Council had some tickets and they wanted a meeting. We couldn't find time in the diary, and they said, "How about you bring your family and you all get to watch this thing, and then we can have the meeting on a Saturday," which I would never normally do. Family time is so precious. And so you say, actually, fine, this is a quid pro quo. You're taking personal time from me, but there's something else that we're getting in return. We have the meeting, and it's all declared and above board.
Because people worry that I think it was a banking organisation or a financial organisation that invited her to the Sabrina Carpenter box at the O2. I know that it goes on all the time in all sorts of different walks of life, but people would also worry that they will now then have some kind of influence over her. So there is in the future.
There is a ministerial code which, if you do breach, you will get sacked. So there are rules around it. And there are many people who offer things, but there's actually nothing directly related to your job. So people need to look at each of these things closely and carefully.
OK. And have you taken a freebie recently?
It's been a long time since.
Not since you've been leader of the opposition.
Well, for things like concerts and so on, no, not really. I get donations to help me with my job. So people give money and I can use it to pay for things like transport, hiring other people's services and so on. So we will always, as politicians, have people giving us things because we don't want to spend public money on on our day-to-day job. But that is the reason why we have a transparent process where everything is declared. And if there is a breach, there is a code there which you get sacked if you breach as a minister and so on. And there are investigations on the standard side when people do break the rules.
OK. You've probably been following the situation with the Reform Party and what's been going on with Rupert Lowe. Lots of people have been saying there's been conversations had about whether he might join the Conservative Party. Do you know about those?
I have no idea what people are talking about. If he's having conversations with Conservatives, they're certainly not people that I speak to. I think it's important that people know what they're voting for. I'm personally not a fan of a lot of people jumping ship from one party to another. People don't understand what they're voting for. And Reform are having problems because they assume that managing members of parliament is easy. They've only got 5 and they've lost 1. They've got 4 now. That's 20% of their party gone. And one of the things that I am very keen to emphasise is that we have the experience and the credibility. It is not easy managing lots of people. You look at the newspapers last year, it was always about Conservatives arguing. Now that's all gone quiet. We are unifying, we are united because I am dealing with many of the tensions and issues. I'm taking us on a journey, net zero being a classic example. Last week I said it's impossible. We need to start thinking about what new policies can be, but making sure that we're bringing it all together and not squabbling in an unseemly fashion in public.
And we're talking a lot about housing this week as well, about the number of houses that are going to be built and how many of those houses might end up going to migrant families. Question from Phil is, if you win the next general election, will you put British people first for housing and not migrants?
Yes, we have to. It cannot be the case that people who come from abroad get prioritised before British citizens. There are many rules that were put in place that are being exploited. Of course, when people are genuine refugees, genuine asylum seekers, we have always wanted to help and make sure that those people were made safe. But people have started abusing that system. People who aren't genuine asylum seekers are abusing the system. Sometimes we're trying to deport people. The courts end up making these bizarre rulings. You have judges making rulings that make no sense, and those are the things that I want us to start tackling. So we're going to take some time to come up with proper plans to deal with those things. But as a British taxpayer, as a British citizen, you should be able to get priority in your own country. That's not a controversial thing.
It shouldn't be. Final question for you is on a voice note, which I hope you'll be able to hear. This is from Chris.
Oh.
Good morning, Mike. Chris from Barnsley. Just a question for the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch. Why is it that politics in this country is so stagnant and boring? And that goes for both parties, not just the current one that's leading the country with Keir Starmer. You look at the razzmatazz of the USA and everything that Donald Trump brings with it, whether he was trying to lead the country or when he's actually in charge. There's a buzz around it, it's entertaining, it's great to watch. Yourselves and Labour, absolutely flatter than 4 o'clock. Outside of Boris Johnson, it's never been entertaining whatsoever. So I just wonder, how can you get people to vote for yourselves?
Okay, that's a great question. I think that there's a lot in that. America is different from the UK.
Yeah.
We've got the stiff upper lip here. We're a lot more reserved. But it's also because so many people are worried about saying the wrong thing.
Yes.
And so we end up just having these sort of technocratic, managerialist language, and no one knows what we're talking about. I'm trying to break that mold. I'm trying to speak in a way that people understand. I've always said that I'm not a media personality. I've never wanted to be in show business. We need to be serious. But I think that there's a much more interesting way that we can do politics.
I think Keir Starmer is inevitably the most boring politician of all time, and maybe that's what he's referring to. I mean, he really is, unfortunately. He could literally sort of set wood.
Yes, I tell people that he's a lawyer, not a leader. He's a lawyer more than anything else. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer. And that also brings its own complications. But I want to make sure that we can actually build things for people, that we can show people some excitement, some vision. And that's the work that the Conservative Party under my leadership has started.
OK. Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mike.
This is Talk. We'll be back after this.